The silence before thunder, the message arrived on a Tuesday. Earth's Global Defense Council gathered in the underground bunker beneath Geneva, their faces illuminated by the harsh blue glow of the holographic display. The translation matrix had already processed the Galactic Assembly's transmission, rendering the alien script into every human language simultaneously. Admiral Sarah Chen read it 3 times, each word burning deeper into her mind. Effective immediately, the species designated humanity will surrender all colonial territories beyond the Sol system. Your expansion privileges are hereby revoked. Compliance within 30 standard cycles or face complete isolation from galactic trade routes. This decision is final. The room erupted. Generals slammed fists on tables. Politicians shouted over each other. But Sarah remained silent, her dark eyes fixed on the signature at the bottom of the message. Supreme Coordinator Zix Theta of the Galactic Assembly, the same creature who had promised Earth a seat at the galactic table just 5 years ago, the same one who had smiled with 3 mouths while shaking the hand of Earth's first ambassador. General Marcus Rivera leaned forward, his weathered face twisted with rage. 23 colonies, 4 million people. They expect us to just abandon them? His voice cracked on the last word. His own daughter lived on New Horizon, one of the targeted worlds. The Assembly controls the hyperlanes, Minister Zhang replied quietly. Without access to their network, our ships would take centuries to reach our colonies. They know we have no choice. Sarah finally spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. There is another option. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the admiral who had earned her reputation during the Mars uprising, the woman who had turned certain defeat into impossible victory. Project Erebus. The name meant nothing to most in the room. Only 3 people knew what Sarah referenced. Deep beneath Jupiter's moon Europa, in laboratories that didn't exist on any official record, humanity had been working on something that violated every known law of physics. Dr. James Morrison, the lead scientist, had called it shadow drift technology. Ships that didn't travel through space but alongside it, existing in the dark matter currents that the Assembly's sensors couldn't detect. How long until it's operational? General Rivera asked, understanding immediately what Sarah implied. 6 months for a full fleet, Sarah replied, but we only have 30 days before the Assembly's deadline. Then we stall, Minister Zhang said, a slight smile playing at her lips. We negotiate, we plead, we beg if necessary. Let them think we're weak, desperate, exactly what they expect humans to be. The plan took shape over the following hours. Earth would appear to comply, beginning the evacuation of outer colonies while secretly accelerating Project Erebus. Every scientist, every engineer, every resource would be quietly redirected to Europa. The Assembly would see a broken, defeated humanity. They wouldn't see the storm building in the darkness. 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah practically lived in the Europa facility, watching as the impossible took shape. The shadow ships didn't look like traditional vessels. They were angular, black constructs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls were composed of a material that existed in a constant state of flux, partially in normal space, partially in the dark matter realm that underpinned reality itself. Dr. Morrison explained it to her using an analogy about fish. Imagine all of space travel until now has been like fish swimming through water. The Assembly's ships, our ships, everyone moves through the same medium. But shadow drift? He gestured at the prototype vessel floating in the massive underground dock. This is like discovering you can walk on top of the water. Different rules, different possibilities. The first test flight nearly killed its pilot. Lieutenant Commander Eric Volkov emerged from shadow space bleeding from his eyes, babbling about colors that didn't exist and sounds that had texture. But he had traveled from Europa to Mars in 12 seconds, a journey that should have taken hours even with the best Assembly hyperdrive. The human brain isn't designed for shadow space, Morrison admitted. We're working on neural dampeners, but how long? Sarah interrupted. 2 weeks. Maybe less if we push the trials. I don't push them. The Assembly's deadline approached. Earth formally requested an extension, citing the complexity of evacuating millions of colonists. Supreme Coordinator Zix Theta appeared on every screen across Earth to deliver the response personally. The alien's crystalline form sparkled with what humans had learned to recognize as amusement. The primitive species requires more time to accept reality. Zix Theta's translated words dripped with condescension. Very well. 10 additional cycles, but as a reminder of the Assembly's authority. The transmission shifted to a live feed from Kepler Station, humanity's pride, the first permanent structure built outside the Sol system. Sarah watched in horror as Assembly warships opened fire. The station's shields lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then 500 human souls became vapor and twisted metal. The feed continued for another minute, showing the debris field that had once been humanity's greatest achievement. Let this serve as education, 6 Theta continued. The Assembly's patience is not infinite. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Sarah heard something she had never heard before. General Rivera was crying. The tough old soldier who had survived 3 wars was weeping for the daughter he had just watched die. Admiral, Dr. Morrison's voice came through her private comm. You need to see this. Sarah made her way to the neural laboratory where Morrison and his team had been working on the shadow drift interface. On the examination table lay Lieutenant Commander Volkov, but something was different. His eyes, which had been bloodshot since his test flight, now held flecks of darkness that moved like living shadows. The exposure changed something, Morrison explained. His brain has adapted. He can see into shadow space even while in normal reality. And Admiral, Morrison paused. He says he can hear them. Hear who? Volkov sat up, his voice steady despite the impossibility of what he was saying. The ships, the shadow ships. They're not just machines. The dark matter, it responds to human thought, to emotion, our anger, our desire for justice. It's making them stronger. Sarah processed this information. How many pilots can undergo the adaptation? All volunteers so far have survived the process. 87 pilots ready for deployment. Make it 800, Sarah commanded. Every military pilot in the Sol system gets the option. Full disclosure of risks. The volunteers came in droves. The destruction of Kepler Station had united humanity in a way no speech or propaganda ever could. They lined up for the painful adaptation process, accepting the permanent change to their neural structure. Each emerged with those distinctive dark-flecked eyes, each reporting the same phenomenon. They could feel the shadow ships waiting, hungry for justice. As the final assembly deadline approached, Earth's visible forces began their shameful withdrawal from the colonies. Transport ships packed with colonists made their slow journey back to Sol, broadcast on every assembly monitoring channel. The aliens celebrated humanity's capitulation, their various species engaging in their equivalent of laughter at the primitive race that had dared dream of the stars. They didn't notice the shadows moving in the darkness between stars. They didn't detect the 800 ships that existed in a realm their sensors couldn't perceive. They didn't hear the whispered promise that echoed through shadow space, spoken by 800 adapted human pilots in perfect synchronization. The darkness has answered. The storm is coming. Sarah stood on the bridge of the SNV Nemesis, the flagship of humanity's shadow fleet. Through the modified viewports, she could see reality from 2 perspectives simultaneously. Normal space showed empty void. Shadow space revealed her entire fleet, waiting like predators in tall grass. Each ship pulsed with an energy that seemed almost alive, fed by the collective will of humanity's rage and determination. Admiral, her tactical officer reported. All shadow vessels report ready, awaiting your command. Sarah looked at the chronometer. 3 hours until the assembly's deadline. 3 hours until humanity was supposed to accept its place as a second-class species, forever confined to one system, while the galaxy moved on without them. Signal all ships, Sarah commanded. Operation Nightfall begins now. The storm unleashed. The first sign of trouble came at Checkpoint Sigma 7, an assembly monitoring station at the edge of what had been human colonial space. The station commander, a methane-breathing Volari named Quex, was reviewing the feeds of humanity's pathetic retreat when his sensors screamed warnings. But the readings made no sense. The gravitational sensors detected massive objects, but visual scanning showed empty space. The energy readings spiked and fell in patterns that violated fundamental physics. Then the shadows themselves seemed to tear open, and death poured through. The SNV Nemesis emerged from shadow space like a shark breaking the surface of a midnight ocean. Its dark matter cannons fired before fully materializing, beams of impossible darkness that didn't destroy so much as simply delete sections of the station from existence. Where the beams touched, matter simply ceased, leaving perfect spherical voids in the station's hull. Quex had just enough time to trigger a distress signal before the station lost all power. In the absolute darkness that followed, he heard something that would haunt the few survivors of that first attack. Human voices broadcast on all frequencies, speaking in perfect unison. The assembly forgot one truth about humanity. We evolved in darkness. We made it our ally, and now we've become it. Across 17 checkpoints simultaneously, shadow ships emerged and struck. The assembly's mighty fleet, considered the most powerful military force in the galaxy, found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't properly see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. Their weapons, designed to work in normal space, passed harmlessly through ships that existed only partially in their reality. Supreme Coordinator Zix Theta received the reports in the Assembly's capital station orbiting the ancient star they called the First Light, the crystalline. Being's form flickered through, spectrums of agitation as data streams showed checkpoint after checkpoint going dark. How? Demanded Fleet Marshal Corax, a six-armed warrior species that had never lost a military engagement. Their technology is primitive. We've seen their ships. You've seen what we wanted you to see, came a transmission on the Assembly's most secure channel. Admiral Sarah Chen's face appeared on their screens, but something was different. Her eyes held those same dark flecks that now marked all of humanity's shadow pilots. You judged us by your standards, by your understanding of physics. But humans have always had a gift for finding solutions in the impossible. This is an act of war. Zix Theta's translation matrix could barely keep up with the harmonic frequencies of rage emanating from the coordinator. War? Sarah laughed, and the sound carried an edge that made even the veteran Corax step back. You destroyed Kepler Station. You murdered 500 innocent people to make a point. You tried to steal our colonies, our future. This isn't war, Coordinator. This is judgment. The connection terminated as the lights in the Assembly's capital station flickered. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in a harsh red glow. Then the reports started flooding in. Shadow ships were emerging throughout Assembly space, not just at the borders but deep in their territory, appearing at will in locations that should have been impossible to reach. The battle for the Nexus Gate, the Assembly's primary hyperlane hub, lasted exactly 17 minutes. Admiral Chen led the assault personally, the Nemesis diving in and out of shadow space like a conductor directing a symphony of destruction. The station's defenders, 300 of the Assembly's finest warships, found themselves fighting an enemy that defied every tactical doctrine they had ever developed. Shadow ships would appear inside their formations, fire and vanish before return fire could be coordinated. Dark matter torpedoes phased through shields as if they didn't exist, detonating inside ships' hulls with devastating effect. The Assembly's proud fleet was reduced to floating scrap, their crews either dead or desperately broadcasting surrender on all frequencies. But humanity wasn't accepting surrenders. Not yet. General Rivera commanded the ground assault on the Assembly's military command world of Proxys Beta. Shadow dropships deposited human soldiers who had undergone partial adaptation, their eyes carrying just enough darkness to see threats from shadow space. The Assembly's ground forces, considered the finest in the galaxy, found themselves fighting soldiers who could step partially into shadow, becoming ghosts that bullets couldn't touch, specters that appeared behind fortified positions. Rivera stood in the ruins of the planetary command center, looking down at the cowering form of Defense Minister Yoth, the being who had signed the order to destroy Kepler Station. The general's daughter's name was Maria. She had been 23, a botanical engineer excited about developing new crops for alien soil. She had sent him a message just hours before the station's destruction, talking about a boy she had met, about the future she was planning. Please, Yoth communicated through its translation device. Mercy is a trait the Assembly values. Mercy? Rivera pulled out an old projectile weapon, a revolver that had belonged to his grandfather. You showed none to our innocent, but I'll show you human mercy. It's quick. The shot echoed through the command center. One bullet, one death. More mercy than the Assembly had shown the 500 souls on Kepler. Within 48 hours, the Galactic Assembly's military infrastructure had collapsed. Their fleets were scattered or destroyed. Their command structure was in chaos. Worlds that had contributed ships and soldiers to the Assembly's forces recalled them immediately, terrified that humanity's shadow fleet would target them next. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Nemesis as it emerged from shadow space directly above the Assembly's capital station. Her fleet materialized around her. 800 ships of impossible design, their dark hulls reflecting nothing but absorbing everything. The station's defenses didn't even attempt to fire. They knew it was useless. "Open a channel to the Assembly Council," Sarah commanded. The main screen activated, showing the grand chamber where representatives of 200 species sat in terrified silence. Supreme Coordinator Zix Theta stood at the central podium, its crystalline form dulled with what humans would recognize as defeat. "Admiral Chen," Zix Theta began, "the Assembly formally requests terms of cease. The Assembly is dissolved," Sarah interrupted. "Effective immediately. Your hyperlane monopoly ends today. All species will have equal access to all trade routes. The colonial territories you stole from various species over the millennia will be returned, and humanity's colonies are restored with an additional 10 systems as reparations for Kepler Station. You cannot simply—" another representative began. Sarah nodded to her weapons officer. A single dark matter beam fired from the Nemesis, surgically precise. It deleted a section of the council chamber's wall, opening it to the void. Emergency force fields activated immediately, but the message was clear. We can. We have. Humanity spent centuries looking at the stars, dreaming of joining a galactic community. You offered us slavery disguised as membership, so we found another way. Sarah's expression softened slightly. But humans can be builders as well as destroyers. Accept these terms and we'll share shadow drift technology with all species equally. Refuse, and face the darkness alone. The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the rebuilt Kepler Station, now called the Maria Rivera Memorial Station, after the general's daughter. The galaxy had changed. Shadow drift technology was revolutionizing travel and trade. No longer controlled by a single authority but shared among all species. The Galactic Assembly had been replaced by the Stellar Alliance, with rotating leadership and no species holding permanent authority over others. Dr. Morrison approached her, his eyes now bearing the same shadow flecks as all who had undergone the adaptation. "The Alliance Council is requesting more information about the neural adaptation process. Several species want to attempt it," Sarah smiled. "Tell them the truth. It requires something that not all species possess, which is the ability to make darkness a friend rather than an enemy. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Doctor. We learned patience in darkness, became comfortable in shadows. We didn't conquer the dark. We joined it." She turned to look out at the stars, visible both in normal space and the shadow realm that existed alongside it. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not through submission or conquest, but through transformation. They had become something new, something the established order hadn't predicted or prepared for. They had become the bridge between light and darkness, and in doing so had changed the galaxy forever. The Shadow Fleet continued its patrols, no longer instruments of vengeance but guardians of a new order. Their pilots, forever changed by their adaptation, could see threats from both realms and stood ready to defend not just humanity, but all species who sought freedom among the stars. Earth's message to the galaxy was clear. Humanity had arrived not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals who had earned their place through ingenuity, determination, and the courage to embrace what others feared. In the darkness between stars, humanity had found its strength, and the galaxy would never be the same.